Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Would You Read It Challenge video for September 2024. The Would You Read It Challenge was a tag started by @2brody, and I'll link it down below. The purpose of the tag was to pick a variety of books, read the first sentence to your audience, and then ask which of the books they would like to continue with. I always thought that a sentence was a little too short to get a feel of a story, so I elongated it to the first few paragraphs of a story. And for the past several months, I have been applying this metric to BookTube Prize ballots. So the BookTube Prize was started in 2019 by Robert Sheard. It's a place for the literary community to come together and judge the best in literary fiction and nonfiction published in English in the US the year before. We are now currently in the final round of the 2024 judging. Fellow judges and I have just a few more days until we have to submit our ballots. Certainly some of us already have, some of us haven't. When it comes to those ballots, these most recent ballots, we're supposed to zip our lips and not talk about them so that we don't influence each other. But I thought I'd go back to ballots of yesteryear, and specifically to the Octafinal ballots, which is our first long list. So we have consider all of the books in contention for yesteryear of the BookTube Prize, except I'm also only focusing on fiction. And in this video, I am focusing on the 2021 BookTube Prize and its Octafinals Group F. So there were 6 books in this ballot. None of them made it to the finals, and I ended up, though, reading 2 of these books on my own anyway, and then 4 of them I haven't read before. But I just figured I would go through these first few paragraphs with you and then share the title of the book and then my thoughts. So without further ado, let's get started. Starting with book number 1. Jesus' Cheese. Deacon County Lambkin of Five Ends Baptist Church became a walking dead man on a cloudy September afternoon in 1969. That's the day the old deacon, known as Sportscoat to his friends, marched out of the plaza of the Causeway Housing Projects in South Brooklyn, struck an ancient .38 Colt in the face of a 19-year-old drug dealer named Deems Clemens, and pulled the trigger. There were a lot of theories floating around the projects as to why old Sportcoat, a wiry, laughing, brown-skinned man who had coughed, wheezed, hacked, guffawed, and drank his way through the cause houses for a good part of his 71 years, shot the most ruthless drug dealer the projects had ever seen. He had no enemies. He had coached the project's baseball team for 14 years. His late wife, Hetty, had been the Christmas Club treasurer of his church. He was a peaceful man, beloved by all. So, what happened? And that was from Deacon King Kong by James McBride. Book 2. Whenever I think of my mother, I picture a queen-sized bed with her lying in it, a practiced stillness filling the room. For months on end, she colonized that bed like a virus, the first time when I was a child, and then again when I was a graduate student. The first time I was sent to Ghana to wait her out. While there, I was walking through Kacheta Market with my aunt when she grabbed my arm and pointed. "Look, a crazy person," she said in Twi. "Do you see? A crazy person." I was mortified. My aunt was speaking so loudly, and the man, tall with dust caked into his dreadlocks, was within earshot. I see, I answered in a low hiss. The man continued past us, mumbling to himself as he waved his hands about in gestures that only he could understand. My aunt nodded, satisfied, and we kept walking past the hordes of people gathered in that agoraphobia-inducing market until we reached the stall where we would spend the rest of the morning attempting to sell knockoff handbags. In my 3 months there, we only sold 4 bags. And that was from Transcendent Kingdom by Ya Jesse. Book 3. Turtle Mountain Jewel-Bearing Plant. Thomas Wajhask removed his thermos from his armpit and set it on the steel desk alongside his scuffed briefcase. His work jacket went on the chair, his lunchbox on the cold windowsill. When he took off his padded tractor hat, a crabapple fell from the ear flap. a gift from his daughter, Fee. He caught the apple and put it on the desktop to admire. Then he punched his time card, midnight. He picked up the keyring, a company flashlight, and walked the perimeter of the main floor. In this always quiet expanse, Turtle Mountain women spent their days leaning into the hard light of their task lamps. The women pasted micro-thin slices of ruby, sapphire, or the lesser jewel garnet onto thin upright spindles in preparation for drilling. The jewel bearings would be used in Defense Department ordnance and in Beluga watches. This was the first time there had ever been manufacturing jobs near the reservation, and women filled most of those coveted positions. They had scored much higher on tests for manual dexterity. And that was from The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich. Book 4. When the moon rose in the third northern hall, I went into the ninth vestibule. Entry for the first day of the 5th month of the year Albatross came to the southwestern halls. When the moon rose in the third northern hall, I went to the ninth vestibule to witness the joining of the three tides. This is something that happens only once every 8 years. The ninth vestibule is remarkable for the 3 great staircases it contains. Its walls are lined with marble statues, hundreds upon hundreds of them, tier upon tier, rising into the distant heights. I climbed up the western wall until I reached the statue of woman carrying a beehive, 15 meters above the pavement. The woman is 2 to 3 times my own height, and the beehive is covered with marble bees the size of my thumb. One bee, this always gives me a slight sensation of queasiness, crawls over her left eye. I squeezed myself into the woman's niche and waited until I heard the tides roaring in the lower halls and felt the walls vibrating with the force of what was about to happen. And that was from Piranesi by Suzanne Clark. Book 5. The hills of Jerusalem are a bath of fog. Rami moves by memory through the straight stretch and calculates the camber of an upcoming turn. 67 years old, he bends low on the motorbike, his jacket padded, his helmet clipped tight. It is a Japanese bike, 750cc, an agile machine for a man his age. Rami pushes the bike hard, even in bad weather. He takes a sharp right at the gardens, where the fog lifts to reveal dark. Corpus separatum. He downshifts and whips past a military tower. The sodium lights appear fuzzy in the morning. A small flock of birds momentarily darkens the orange. At the bottom of the hill, the road dips into another curve, obscured in fog. He taps down to second, lets out the clutch, catches the corner smoothly, and moves back into third. Road number 1 stands above the ruins of Qualunya, all history piled here. He throttles at the end of the map, takes the inner lane, passing signs for the old city, for Givat Ram. The highway is a scattershot of morning headlights. He leans left and salmons his way out into the faster lane, towards the tunnels, the separation barrier, the town of Beit Jala. 2 answers for 1 swerve, Gilo on one side, Bethlehem on the other. Geography here is everything. And that was from Apiragon by Colum McCann. And finally, Book 6. Mike's taking off for Osaka, but his mother's flying into Houston. Just for a few weeks, he says. Or maybe a couple of months, he says, but I need to go. The first thing I think is, fuck. The second's that we don't have the money for this. Then it occurs to me that we don't have any savings at all. But Mike's always been good about finances, always cool about separating his checks. It's something I'd always taken for granted about him. And then there's a break. Now he's saying he wants to find his father. The man's gotten sick. Mike wants to catch him before he goes. And I'm on the sofa, half listening, half charging my phone. You haven't seen your mom in years, I say. She's coming for you. I've never met her. I say, I don't even fucking like your dad. True, says Mike, but I already bought the ticket. And Mom will be here when I get back, says Mike. You're great company. She'll live. And that was from Memorial by Brian Washington. Okay, so I guess I figure I'll start with the 2 books I've already read, and I'll go from least favorite to most favorite. So I'll start with Apiragon by Colum McCann, which I was actually pretty deeply disappointed in after I read it. This is a story about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I'd actually read some of his short stories, or at least one of his short stories, about the conflict, and I liked it. But this one I really feel like eschewed any human connection for a bunch of like pie in the sky commentary. And, you know, now, even more than then, I just find that pretty odious. And what we really need is human connection that I don't really feel like I necessarily found in this story. He was just too taken with just, you know, vague philosophical ideas, or, you know, just rambling off on tangents. And I just, it did not work for me. And I was deeply disappointed. I was very excited for this book. And then the second one I've read was Transcendent Kingdom by Ya Jesse. I've read Homegoing and really enjoyed it, and was keen to read this one as well. It's a very different sort of book. Instead of, you know, about multiple generations really spanning a while, this is about one generation, about a Ghanaian immigrant family in the US. It's particularly about the main character dealing with the loss of her brother to a drug overdose. It's not how the story begins, but I guess I think it's interesting to look back, and you know, what really struck me in those couple paragraphs was, you know, the relationship or the reaction of her aunt and her to the idea of a person with, you know, some sort of mental illness, or, you know, faculty problem, which, you know, then is something that comes into play when how different people look at people suffering from drug addiction. And the main character is very much oscillating between, you know, looking at drug addiction from a scientist's point of view, and she's pushed into the sciences by the death of her brother, versus a religious point of view because she grew up in a religious household. And I thought just overall it was a very moving story. And I guess for the other four, I will move from the last one to the first one. In part because book 6, which is Memorial by Brian Washington, was my least favorite. I feel like it started in a very confusing manner, where I really had very little idea of what was going on. And I mean, maybe an argument could be made that I kind of figured it out, I think, by the end. Like, Mike is a guy who decided to visit his father instead of his mother, even though apparently, you know, his mother is coming to see him after some significant absence, and it seems like Mike has a partner or a roommate or somebody who is the protagonist, who, or, you know, the POV, who is reacting to this. And I don't understand why we couldn't just, you know, in the first few sentences, it's just like completely confusing about like who's traveling where and why and what these relationships are. And I don't understand why it couldn't just, you know, be more direct about it. And I don't understand why he doesn't use quotation marks, which is a big pet peeve. Then I'll talk about Piranesi by Suzanne Clark, which is interesting because it's definitely a fantastical world. This is a speculative world. It seems like maybe a secondary fantasy almost, which I find intriguing. There's a lot of rich world building in it, and I think I might have more mileage for this than maybe some other BookTube Prize judges. Then again, I do know Piranesi was and remains a very popular book, so there's that. I really enjoyed the world building. I would, you know, maybe niggle a little that, you know, after this, maybe it's time to be introduced more fully to a character. But I do just like this amount of world building to make a, you know, an alien place feel real. But I would probably quibble about how many proper nouns there are in this, because, you know, almost everything here seems to be a proper noun. And, you know, I think of proper nouns as something to denote importance. But if everything's a proper noun, then what's important? Also, you know, I have to say I'm speaking ironically from experience, because I've certainly had people read the fantasy novel I'm writing and say, maybe there's a few too many proper nouns in here. So I'm, you know, on that seesaw myself. Next, I'll talk about The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich, who is an author who is very famous, and I have yet to still read any of her novels, and this one could be interesting. I mean, it's, you know, intriguing enough opening. I mean, I don't think it's anything, you know, earth-shattering, but it introduces us to a character in a specific, you know, world, basically, and that could be enough. You know, we know this man is a watchman. We know that he has a relationship with his daughter. We know a little bit about the history of jobs on the reservation and who is getting them, and how this is a sort of new endeavor. And so, it's all, niggles that could, move into something else. I could be here for this. But maybe if I were to pick a story to continue with, which I probably won't because I'm already overwhelmed by my reading, I would go with Deacon King Kong by James McBride. Maybe more because of how much I enjoyed The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store, which was his later novel, and how much I feel like I should give more of his fiction now a try. And I gotta say, this one definitely does open with a bang, somewhat literally speaking, where it seems like a very unassuming character who nobody would think would do anything violent goes ahead and kills a dangerous drug dealer in his neighborhood. And, there's a big question of why. I mean, I have a lot of, unfounded, hypothesis about it, perhaps, but I don't know anything for sure. And, presumably after, McBride asks the question, why did he do this? The novel would go on to answer it, and I would be here to see that answer. Would you like to know that answer in Deacon King Kong, or have you read the book, and what do you think about it? Or about any of the books that I've mentioned here, whether you've read them or not? I'd be very curious to know. And that about covers it for me now. I'll also link to the BookTube prize down below, as well as to Goodreads links for the books I mentioned, or reviews if I have written them about these books. And anyway, I gotta go now and do some laundry. This black outfit is my, end of the line, do some laundry now outfit. So anyway, expect me back on this channel in the next few days as I do my September book haul. It's in fact been a pretty crazy month in terms of a book haul. I'm very much looking forward to it and perhaps intimidated to sit down and talk about it. But it should be fun. Lots of books, so stay tuned. And I hope my fellow judges for the BookTube prize are doing well, especially if, like me, you're racing toward that finish line. So looking forward to getting there and seeing who the big winners will be this year. And in the meantime, whether or not you're judging for the BookTube prize or not, thanks so much for watching, everyone. And I'll see you next time.